in much the same way that you might go to like a YouTube channel about physics to help you on your physics test or whatever. Like, you know,
you made Clippy.
yeah,
You made Magic Clippy.
yeah. That's exactly what we did. This 100% is just Clippy, but as a magic item.
It looks like you're writing a research paper.
Hello there, adventurers, and welcome to Wally DM. Today we're going to take a look at 3 magic items that are inspired by Strixhaven. When I say inspired, they are homebrew magic items that were created by the influence of Magic the Gathering cards from the Strixhaven block. Now we're putting this video out in conjunction with Strixhaven, a curriculum of chaos, and if these type of items are in the book, that would be fantastic, but probably not going to happen, so these could be additional magic items that you could have in your game. If you're a player, ask your DM to throw them in there, or if you're a DM, maybe give them out to your players, especially if you're going to be playing the D&D version of Strixhaven. Now, of course, I didn't create all 3 of these magic items myself. I had some help, and coming along on this journey with me today is Josiah from the Dungeon Dad YouTube channel.
Greetings.
And Trevor from Classes and Constructs.
Hello, everyone.
So this ought to be a lot of fun, and if you're interested in seeing the written version of these magic items so you can print them out for yourself, be sure to click the link below. I have them on my website, so go and check them out. And getting us started today is going to be Josiah. Josiah, what Magic the Gathering card from Strixhaven did you choose, and what item did you create?
Yeah, so I chose the card Guiding Voice as my inspiration for this item. Guiding Voice is a very simple common card. It is a 1-cost white card, which is just put a 1/1 counter on target creature. And you also learn, which is that fun mechanic where you get to pull one of the cards in your sideboard and add it to your hand. I want magic items in general to have a personality to them, sometimes literally, but even the ones that are not actually sentient items, I love it so much when magic items have a little bit of flair beyond just like, I mean, don't get me wrong, as a fighter you're hyped to get that +1 longsword. Like you see the +1 +2 +3 bonus, you're like, yeah, great, I'll just be better at doing the things I'm already doing. But I love it when magic items have a little bit of flavor attached to them, so it makes it feel a lot more engaging and visceral and like real, right? So that was kind of what I wanted to do with this item, and basically what I landed on is an item that I call the Bottled Voice of Guidance. So this is a wondrous item, a piece of adventuring gear. It does not require attunement. It's an uncommon magic item. And I will read you the description that I came up with for this, which is this fine glass bottle is wrapped in soft black fabric and stoppered with a black cork. Around the neck is a fine golden thread, which is fastened at one end to the cork. And the fabric smells of sage. When shaken, you can hear muffled voices inside. If you make a DC 20 perception check, because you know your players are going to try to listen to see exactly what those voices are saying, you'll be able to distinguish that the 2 voices are arguing about philosophy. So immediately I want this item to be like, okay, this is clearly a magic item. This is weird. The whole idea with this item is that you can use a bonus action to uncork the bottle, whereupon a kindly voice will come from the bottle and give you constructive feedback and advice on whatever the next action you're attempting to make is. So if you're in combat, you pop open this bottle with your bonus action, you're about to make an attack roll, you're going to hear a kindly voice kind of be like, oh, you should consider striking from below. Their armor seems to be weaker there, which will give you an extra D4. Very much like the spell Guidance, which was what I thought of when I made this item. Now, we know Guidance only affects skill checks, but I wanted this to have a little bit more utility. So it adds a D4 to your next D20 roll. So you can use it outside of combat to make a skill check as well. Like if you're making a skill check to try to search a room, you pop the bottle open, it'll be like, oh, you should try looking on top of the shelf, like whatever, like that kind of thing, right? So it's giving you a little bit of literal guidance while you're trying to do your thing. So I thought that was a really fun utility item, but it's not super powerful because it's basically giving you the effect of a cantrip, but a little bit better. However, I wanted there to also be a little bit more flavor beyond that, a little bit of a bite, if you will. So, as I mentioned before, this bottle contains 2 voices, which are arguing with each other inside. If you use the bottle 3 times in the same day, there's a 50% chance that the 4th use will summon the other voice, which is much more cruel and impatient. And that voice will have the opposite effect. It will cause you to subtract 1d4 from your next d20 roll. So if you start abusing this item, basically on your 4th, maybe you're making an attack roll, and before you do it, you pop open the bottle, and you're like, oh, what should I do? And suddenly you're greeted with this other voice that's like, oh my god, you suck so much at this. Just stab him. Like, come on. You're like, ah, geez, what the hell? Which is going to cause you to subtract a d4 from the next d20. So it can be a very helpful item, but you want to use it sparingly. You don't want to abuse that voice in the bottle. Now, the final thing that I added to this is if you, because there's still a 50% chance you'll get that positive voice, right? But if the bottle is ever used more than 8 times in the same day, which is a fair amount, by the same person, both of the voices just become, they're done with you. They become exasperated. So for the next week, anytime that person tries to use the bottle, both the voices will chime in and just start ridiculing you and being like, oh my god, dude, like, you don't get it already? Like, come on. We've been over this. Like, you keep relying on us, which will cause you to detract 1d8 from the next roll. So that's obviously not something that players are going to use once that happens, but I imagine it being a kind of fun, like, okay, like I'm maybe using this magic item a little bit too much. So it has stops and protections in place to prevent players from just basically getting a free guidance on every roll they make for the rest of the game. If you use it sparingly, you're going to get nothing but upside. If you overuse it a little bit, you're taking a bit of a risk. If you overuse it a ton, the item's just going to say, okay, we're done with you for a week. Let's try again when you've done things on your own for once. And in terms of the appearance of this item, I wanted it to be kind of wrapped in that like black cloth, very like professor robe-esque. And having the stopper be black with the little gold thread on it is kind of like the cap, like a graduation cap almost. And the fact that it smells like sage is just a stupid pun because it's a sage giving you sage advice. That's kind of where we landed on with this thing. So that was what I came up with for my item.
That is so awesome. I mean, especially if you're a dungeon master that can do voices, giving 2 different voices, one for, you know, the good and one for, you know, the negative would be absolutely amazing. But first place that I went to on this, especially for like a lot of the one shots I run, is and so I'm probably going to use this is for like puzzles and traps. Like if they need help trying to figure something else out or whatever, they need a hint or a clue, be like, well, you do have that bottle. And then you could use that if they can't get a puzzle or trap or riddle or whatever else. And like you said, as the more they use it, the worse information they're probably going to get. So
Absolutely.
I absolutely love this, and it's going in one of my games.
Yeah, I love this and you built in really good like checks too, because like the guidance spell itself can easily be, I don't know if abused is the right word, but like relied upon or overused. And like this is just a fun way you've created a non-sentient sentient item where like you can still do the role-playing thing with it, and it has this stopgap so the players don't exclusively rely on it. But I really like what Wally pointed out. It's a really good way, especially for one shots or for newer players, for the DM to like give them actual like meta tips, but it's through the lens of this like helpful voice that's coming out of the bottle. It's also really interesting because like when I'm doing a lot of this homebrew, I don't know why, but I normally like filter by artifacts when I'm creating magic items. And the fact that you came up with this just by looking at a spell was like, it opened my eyes to a lot of other possibilities with this homebrew, like in general.
Yeah, same here. When you picked a sorcery, it's just like interesting, and then I read through it and I was just like, that's genius.
Yeah, I guess
awesome.
I looked at a lot of the magic items, and originally it's funny because I almost ended up choosing basically one of the same things that one of you guys had done, which I guess we'll get further into the video later. But yeah, I don't know. I was just trying to pick something that wasn't going to be chosen. I was like, I'll just do a spell, whatever. But yeah, I think that's a really good point too. What both of you guys said is that like obviously adding a 1d4 to your next roll is the mechanical version of what this thing does, because we need mechanics for how our items work. But yeah, you could absolutely interpret that as just like, oh, it's giving you helpful tips. And like, I imagine these things being used in a campus like Strixhaven as like study aids, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, like you know, yeah, everyone has their standard issue guiding voice in a bottle that might help you out in like a tricky problem. Be like, oh, have you considered thinking about it in this way? You know, in much the same way that you might go to like a YouTube channel about physics to help you on your physics test or whatever. Like, you know,
you made Clippy.
yeah,
You made Magic Clippy.
yeah. That's exactly what we did. This 100% is just Clippy, but as a magic item.
It looks like you're writing a research paper.
Let me give you some tips on your thesis statement.
Right.
But yeah, no, I think too that if you really wanted to take it the extra mile and go beyond just like the mechanics there and make it a quasi sentient item or attach some type of history to it, or like maybe there's 2 ghosts in there or whatever you want to do, like you can do that. You don't have to, but I do that a lot with magic items that are just in the book, is like kind of add a little extra thing to them to fulfill whatever specific purpose you're after, right? So yeah, I think you could totally kind of almost form a relationship with this. And I'm just thinking of like the testing phase of when the players first get a negative result, but then they hand it to like a different player and that doesn't happen to them. And they're like, okay, so this is based on one person like abusing this too much. I don't know. I think there's a lot of room for shenanigans depending on how the DM wants to handle an item like this, which is always fun.
Absolutely. You could even go, if you wanted to adjust it yourself, you could even go like with a percentile roll, where you actually hand the percentile dice to the player, and then each time they use it, the percent that they get, the negative result goes up, and then, you know.
Oh, that's a really cool way to do it.
You
Yeah.
could make them, after like the second or third use, they have to make a persuasion check to the bottle to be like, come on, like please help me out. Like, and it's like the DC gets higher every time they use it. Like it starts at like 10, goes up by 2 every time they use it beyond like the first couple of uses.
Oh my goodness. This is awesome.
Yeah.
This is so going in one of my games for sure. This is so cool. So Trevor, what's the magic item you came up with?
So I decided to use Poet's Quill, like I was saying when we were talking about Josiah's item. I filtered by artifacts because that's just how my brain tends to operate. And Poet's Quill is a 1 and a black equipment. So it is essentially the magic equivalent of a item or magic item. And when it enters the battlefield, you learn, and the equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has lifelink. So in Magic, if they deal damage, you gain that much life. Now, obviously, some of those mechanics don't equate really well. And when I think Quill, I think of wizards, but I also think of bards. I really, really like thinking of bards more flexibly. That's probably not a word, but like not just as musicians, right? Poets are bards. Shakespeare was a bard. Right, so a quill can be used by a bard as well. So this is a rare magic item that requires attunement by a bard or a wizard. And again, I don't know if this is a thing or not, but based on the class of the attuned like character, they get a different effect. So if it's attuned to a bard, then during a short rest, they can create an inspiration scroll. And this is essentially their bardic inspiration, but in the form of a magic item that they can give to someone. And they can use the person who has the scroll can use a bonus action to read it, and they get bardic inspiration. They get the bardic inspiration die, so it lets them kind of use a delayed bardic inspiration in a way. It removes the range restriction. Is really the biggest thing that it does. So if a wizard is attuned to this magic item, they get Trusty Pen, which means it halves the transcribing time for adding spells to their spellbook or crafting spell scrolls. Now, this could cause a like mathematical problem because I know the different school subclasses have already like reduced time, but I think player and DM can decide exactly how much less time this would take, right? I don't know if it would take a quarter time or how you would want to rule that, but I just wanted something that would make them more efficient at writing. And then regardless of the attuned creature, they would get the following effect. So proficiency bonus times per long rest. When they deal damage to a single target with a spell slot, they gain temporary HP equal to half the damage dealt.
Oh, nice.
This is how I'm trying to work in lifelink, where they gain life back. I may have put too many stopcaps on it. I'm honestly not sure. But like, I didn't want it to be cantrips because then you always have temporary HP. So I don't know if that's necessarily like as balanced as it could be, but I wanted it to be something that had a combat benefit as well, right? So when you deal damage, you gain life. And I did it as temporary HP, so you couldn't just continue healing yourself because temporary HP would replace itself, right? So that's what I decided to come up with for the Poet's Quill.
I like it. And especially for me, so I'm not much of a wizard player, but I do like to play bards. They're definitely top 3 for me. So I could see this having a hat with the quill stuck in it and then bringing that out. And then like you mentioned, it takes away the range of the inspiration. So splitting the party, be like, wait a minute. And you just like write some encouraging words like love you, good luck, XOXO or something, and scratch, hand it off to them and send them on their way, and they can use that for inspiration. I absolutely love that idea. That's great.
Yeah, I think the way that you handle temporary hit points with this is perfect. Like to be the lifelink equivalency. I think that that's kind of exactly where you want to land with that, right? Because temporary hit points have kind of their own checks and balances built into it, because whenever you gain temporary hit points, if you already have temporary hit points, you just take whichever number is greater. So it's not like you can use this to just accumulate a crazy amount of HP and be like, oh, I'm a wizard, but I have 100 temporary hit points that I've been building up from just blasting rats with fireballs before we go for the big final encounter, right? So but it also, like, it's good because with, say, a fireball, there is potential that your one big chunk of temporary hit points is like 30 or 40, which is sick. Like that's a very powerful barrier to have, but it prevents you from effectively making it an infinite pool of health. And also, like, I mean, it's proportionate to the resources you're expending, right? Like if you want to use a fireball, that's still a 3rd level spell. Yeah, I think that this is a really fun item, and I'm a big fan of items that change their effect based on who's using it, and I think having it do something different specifically for the bard and the wizard is very fun.
Yeah, as written, it's single target, so it would, like, fireball would be the most damage to a single target, but I think based on what you were describing, I think that, like, I would be fine with you gain all. I think that you're right. I think that, like, you're using a 3rd level spell slot. I think you're right. I think it doesn't necessarily need to be single target. I think it could be, because it's already only temporary hit points, I think it would probably be better off to just be like, all right, you gain half the damage you'll deal. Even if you end up doing max damage on a fireball, you're still only getting so many temporary hit points. And it's not like it passes the bag of rats test, right? Like you're not going to just be able to keep farming temporary hit points.
Yeah, so, 100%.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm just picturing like a version of this item that, because something, and this is just something that is kind of a little bit off topic but is still relevant, is whenever we see items in D&D, because the implication is that it's like stealing life from the things that it's killing, right? So anytime you see an item that steals life in D&D, it so often has like a malevolent undertone to it. So if you just wanted to use this item as written, I think that's perfectly fine, and it's going to be really fun. But I love the idea of attaching some type of lore to this, which would obviously be game specific, but it's like, oh yeah, this was like a quill that belonged to some wizard at the school who was kind of dabbling in like some uncool necromancy stuff, and like his soul is kind of attached to it, or his malignance is somehow bonded to it. So maybe the DM is like keeping track of how many temporary hit points are healed. Here's what we do. This is the wizard's phylactery, and all the temporary hit points that come in are also being given to like empowering this undead lich. So once you've collected like 1,000 temp HP somewhere in the world, you've also, unbeknownst to you, revived a lich. And then the quill still works for you. Like you just unleashed a lich somewhere, and he's just like, oh, finally, like.
That is so cool. I absolutely love that. I never would have thought of that.
And then I'm just imagining an encounter where he just shows up to get his quill back.
Yeah, he wants his quill back.
Yeah, and he's like, you've been taking good care of this for me, thank you. Like, maybe even rewards the player, right? Because he's like, I'm going to take that back, I need it, it's personal to me. But you did help raise me from the dead, and now I can continue my mission of conquering the world. So here's like 500 gold pieces and like a cool magic item. Deuces, and then just teleports away. And the party, who's like level 4, is just like, so this is a problem.
That is so cool. That is such a cool plot hook that I definitely wouldn't have thought of on my own. Like, that is so awesome.
Oh my gosh.
I think that would be hilarious because it's like it would be completely unrelated to what they're doing too, and whether they are like, well, we have to deal with this, and like we don't want to tell the professors because we're gonna get in trouble, or maybe
We
like
accidentally unleashed a lich. Like, whoops.
so we found this dusty old quill in a weirdly ornate wooden box somewhere in a part of the school no one's been in a long time, and then the owner of it showed up, and then like just the look of horror on the professor's face, like, oh my god, like,
That
or
is
maybe they decide to
perfect.
deal with it themselves.
That is
Yeah,
perfect
yeah.
Strixhaven stuff. Oh man, they steal it from their desk. Holy cow, that's awesome. Oh,
What? Yeah, and then you find out like all the professors have been in like a panic to find this thing for the past like a month, but they didn't want to say anything out loud because they didn't want the students to freak out that there was like maybe gonna be a lich showing up sometime soon. Like,
that is so cool. That is so cool.
oh, that's awesome. Okay, so our last Strixhaven magic item that is homebrewed is, surprise, also inspired by Poet's Quill. And I don't know about you guys, but looking through the list of Strixhaven cards, there wasn't very many artifacts there to pick from as far as, and that's, I also, like you, Trevor, that's kind of what I look for when doing a magic item. And thank goodness Josiah came in with that sorcery card, because now that gives me a whole different way to look at these magic cards when I'm trying to come up with something. But regardless, this is what I came up with for the Poet's Quill. And again, just to reiterate, this is 1 in a black. It's an artifact equipment that when it enters the battlefield, you get to learn. And for those of you that are not familiar with the learn mechanic, that means you can reveal a lesson card that you own from outside the game and put it into your hand, or you can discard a card and draw a card. And then of course we get the life link and the equip cost. So I wanted to focus on that learn mechanic, being able to draw a card, or to get a card from outside the game. So this is what I came up with. The Wizard's Quill, uncommon, wondrous item, can only be used by a wizard. This elegant feather has the power to recall spells by spending 1 minute to jot down notes. Once per day, a wizard may use the quill to choose and replace a spell currently memorized with a spell from their spellbook. If the spell they choose to learn is from the school of necromancy or evocation, then they retain both spells. So this is, I for wizards, they study their spells in the morning and then that's it until they finish a long rest. So I like the idea of being able to use this quill and using that lesson mechanic to, like, okay, I really need my disguise self spell, but I didn't memorize it today, so they can use this quill to do that. And then of course, since this is a black Magic the Gathering card, I wanted to include something with the necromancy or evocation, and that's where I came up with the spells from those schools of magic.
yeah, I think that this is a magical item. I just want to say I think it's hilarious that you guys picked the same card.
Yeah.
And it's also hilarious that they ended up so completely different.
Yeah.
Like just completely different reads, both of which flavorfully make perfect sense to what the card is. So I think that's really fun. But this is a magic item that, like, if I'm a wizard, I'm stoked to have. This is an unreal magic item because it's one of those things that I know I personally struggle with whenever I'm playing a prepared caster, which are some of my favorite classes to play. I love playing a wizard, but is that choice paralysis, right? Because first of all, especially as a wizard, you're limited to what spells you know. So you have to choose when you level up, like, which spells you're going to take. And you're also limited by which ones you're going to prepare for the day. So having that freedom to be like, well, I probably won't need enlarge reduce today, but I want to know it for that niche situation. So at least if it comes up or I need to cast a spell like that, I know I can, is awesome. Like a really good one is like protection from poison. Protection from poison is an invaluable spell if you're fighting things that do poison damage. But if you're not, it's useless, right? So it's one of those spells you want to have on your list, like, oh, we're going in the sewers today. All right, I'll prepare protection from poison. But with this, you don't have to worry about it. So it's not like, oh, we want to go in the sewers. Let me take a fucking 8-hour nap first. It's like, oh, we're going into the sewers. Like, okay, I'm good to go. I have my magic item. So I think that utility is invaluable just for peace of mind for wizards.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the most hilarious thing about this, so I had already started planning and like come up with my plan for Poet's Quill I think it was like around when we like were in the initial planning stages for this collaboration. And then I saw yours and I was like, well, this works out. Like they're not even remotely similar, but they both, like Josiah was saying, they both work for the card.
Mm-hmm.
But not only that, in my Friday game, I just gave my wife's character, Edgar, this wizard that she's playing, a spellbook page magic item that does essentially this. And it's like, it's just so bizarre to me that like we all saw that need for a wizard because of the reasons that Josiah was saying. There are some spells that are so useful in certain situations,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't want to have to be the guy who's like, all right, well, we're going to do that, but I have to take an 8-hour nap first. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you want to be able to be flexible. And when you're a prepared caster, it's so hard. It's just cool that like you came up with that item and I had created a parallel item in my home games. It's just so fun that it worked out that way. But I love this. And I really like the like necromancy evocation flavor too. I love that addition.
Thank you. So I think there's a lot of similarities between Magic the Gathering and D&D. Well, I mean, I know that there are, but especially when it comes down to like magic items and spells, because like if you're building a magic deck, you've got to cut cards that you really want to put in. And that's like one of the most painstaking parts of building a deck is you've got a stack of 200 cards. You got to cut it down to whatever. And the same, like both of you said, with your spells that you're preparing for the day, you could have the biggest spell book. I mean, you could have like 40 different spells in there, but you're only getting so many that you can have prepared for that day. And then it just comes down to, then you worry about, oh, did I study the right ones, you know, or whatever. I really want to do this. I've never casted that spell, which may not be as useful, but this item is going to give you a way to be able to do that sometimes. So,
yeah. And there's always that feel bad moment where like just using the example that Josiah said, where like, if you know you're going to a swamp, you're going to prepare spells for that.
mm-hmm.
But if that just comes up naturally because of role playing, there's that feel bad moment where you're like, I could be more prepared for this than I am. And there's no equivalent. There's no equivalent in 5e to like sideboarding in a game of competitive Magic where you can swap stuff. I guess the equivalent would be like a long rest, but like this item solves that problem, and I just love it. I think it's so flavorful.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that again, it's like you say, when it has that kind of little like thing that players will get when you get this item. You're like, okay, I get it. It works like this, cool. But then the last line where it's like, if it's a necromancy or evocation spell, you get both. It kind of makes you go, okay, well, why? Which makes anytime a magic item makes you go, why, is one of those things, because it means that there's more to it than what you realize. Like, it's not just a magic quill. It's like it was created for this purpose, right?
I mean, bouncing off of the idea that you mentioned for the poet, like for my version of the Poet's Quill, theoretically, if you're copying necromancy and evocation spells, there could be it could be a Lich's spell book, and every time you're copying those spells, the reason why you retain both is because a copy of that spell is also going into another wizard's spell book.
Oh, that's amazing.
Who's only interested in evocation or necromancy.
Right, and they're
spells.
just farming these spells from this magic quill as like people are just not knowing that they're like benefiting this like potential enemy later on.
Hell yeah. I love things like that, magic items that don't necessarily screw you over in the moment, but there's a vagueness about something that you're doing with them, and then having that come up way later, and it's like, yeah, you're actually doing this, this, and this. And especially if you do what you just described and you have that wizard be like an enemy that they have to fight later, and they start using those spells against the party, and it's like, yeah, this guy knows like an empowered version of Raise Dead because you found that spell and copied it in this book, and now they're using it against you. Like,
yeah,
stuff like that is wonderful.
That is absolutely brilliant. Oh my goodness, I love that. So those are 3 magic items that we came up with, and again, these were inspired by Magic the Gathering cards from Strixhaven. If you would like to use these in your game, I will put a link where you can find all of these in the description below, so be sure to check them out. But I do want to thank my guests for coming on and talking about Magic the Gathering to D&D magic items. Let us know where they can find you. Josiah?
Yeah, you can find me pretty much everywhere as Dungeon Dad on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. That's actually a lie. My Twitter handle is Dungeon Papa because someone on Twitter is Dungeon Dad. It's a banned account. I don't know. #free Dungeon Dad. Let's get that going. But Yeah, you can predominantly you can find me on YouTube. I make D&D content focused primarily around taking older monsters from previous versions of the game, which we do not have anymore, and converting them into 5th edition, along with your other slew of D&D tips and lore videos and that kind of stuff. Also, most I guess excitingly right now, you can find me on the Zero Doxy Twitch channel every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we are playing an Innistrad inspired D&D campaign. So if you like Magic and you like D&D, I mean, if you're watching this video, there's a pretty good chance both of those things are true, and you want to see some Innistrad stuff. We're playing with a lot of lovely, talented people over there every Thursday evening. So that's where you can find me.
Fantastic. And Trevor, where can they find you at?
Trevor, I'm Classes and Constructs on YouTube, as well as on Twitter. And I think there's a Twitch and a TikTok, but I haven't posted on those yet, at least as of recording this. But I tend to do this kind of stuff a lot on my channel. I also do some general like DM tips, player tips, book reviews, that kind of thing. But I do a lot of homebrew inspired by Magic the Gathering. It's where I get a lot of my ideas. So I figured I would share it with the world. I do a lot of stat blocks for monsters based on Magic cards, and I'll probably start doing more Magic items and spells as well. So if you're interested in any of that, come on over to the YouTube channel.
Fantastic. And don't forget to leave a comment below if you like these ideas, or if there's something you would do differently. Tell us how you would make these magic items, or if there's a card from Strixhaven that you think would make the perfect magic item for your game, let us know that as well. So thank you very much for watching. We appreciate you being here, and on to the next.